rights groups say Idaho is part of the shameful 7.
That's the 7 states not adopting the National Prison Rape Elimination Act. Roland Barris is on our side tonight to explain what's going on.
Yeah, Governor Otter says the act goes too far and that Idaho is actually doing enough to protect its inmates. But considering Idaho's maximum security prison has the 2nd worst record in the country for sexual assaults, well, the chorus of voices urging a change of heart is growing.
The Idaho Correctional Center was dubbed Gladiator School for its out-of-control violence and incidents of prison rape.
Lust, passion, and/or sexual desire.
A female security supervisor sexually assaulted an inmate at juvenile corrections.
The state has raped my client,
and her victim plans to sue.
I have a great deal of concern.
And the governor says the state wasn't able to keep the abuse from happening.
We've tried to do that, but obviously we've failed.
But despite all that, he won't adopt the Prison Rape Elimination Act that Idaho's been working towards since 2003.
The governor says it's just too expensive, but the Southwest Idaho Juvenile Detention Center was the first facility in the entire country to go PREA compliant. And at the time, the director said the costs were negligible. Certainly, it would be far more expensive to implement at the state prison, but so far 43 states in the country have implemented PREA, even Mississippi, in part because to not do so would cost 5% of DOJ funding.
I would say that's a bad move. I think it's going to be a much more expensive move in the long run, and you're going to stretch already stretched resources even further.
Then there's the potential court costs.
More and more private lawsuits are brought forth that the state has to defend, and what we have seen in many cases that the state is actually losing in some of these legal challenges, and so ultimately that's more cost to the taxpayers.
Governor Otter wouldn't do an interview with On Your Side to defend his position on PREA. His office directed us to his letter to Attorney General Eric Holder, where he says PREA is full of red tape and would cost millions the state doesn't have. But he also points out that Idaho's already incorporated most of PREA's best standards, something Kelly Miller of the Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence questions.
We are clearly not doing a great job. There was a study that came out just a year or so ago that talked about Idaho having the 2nd highest inmate-on-inmate sexual assault and rape in the country.
The governor, in his letter, says to ensure we continue to do what's right for Idaho, we've established a task force on zero tolerance of sexual assault against incarcerated persons. But Miller says it's difficult to take seriously a panel made up almost entirely of corrections managers and law enforcement.
I think it's a significant gap that on that task force you don't have anyone from the community. You don't necessarily have anyone on that panel or that task force that has expertise in sexual assault and trauma.
The governor insists Idaho is dedicated to a zero-tolerance approach to prison rape, but if the McCormick case is any indication, it just doesn't have the ability to enforce it.
Now, you know, there are always those who say the violent criminals deserve whatever they get in prison, but of course not all are violent. And remember, we're also talking about protecting juveniles with this act. The question is, should we spend the money just about every other state in the union is putting forth to protect those and other inmates from the abuse that they may never recover from if we don't help them?